the crises today, as a matter of fact, for my conclusion, to begin it, I said the real burden of the debate, from my perspective, is the question, are the crises of today crises of the morality of specific investments, or rather, are they crises about God, and therefore about the working person? Because I found that the whole topic of the social doctrine of the church and work ultimately is a question about the meaning of man, and therefore a consciousness of God. And as a matter of fact, the feeling I get, at least the thought I get, is that I'm working in a system in which we have a practical atheism. I would say that the Pope is the new evangelization that he's constantly presenting to us, this year of faith that we're coming up to now. The whole problem, he says, is to cross a threshold of consciousness. And when I got to get the name right, Stephen, when you mentioned Walker Percy, I love Walker Percy, and the first thing I thought of was the example that he gives of Helen Keller. And in fact, this whole thought, I would say, is about Helen Keller and the experience of her discovery of herself, her I, in the naming of the water in 1887 in Tuscumbia, Alabama. And was in that moment of discovering who she was, in the moment of work, which was naming the animals, or rather, it was naming the water. And now I'm thinking of Adam naming the animals, but it's the same thing. It's she naming the water. She suddenly came to a consciousness of who she was, and she describes it in detail about the scales falling and suddenly coming to everything had meaning now because of this discovery of the self. And I would say that what the problem that we are culturally right now is we really don't know who we are, and as a result, we don't know who God is, and we're made in the image and likeness of God. So I have a statement here, which somebody helped me to bring it down to 3.5 minutes, so I'll see if I can't do it in 3.5 minutes. SRI, of which I had very little knowledge when the topic was presented to me, I wrote here, tends to choose among investment opportunities by applying moral categories to the products that companies produce. This is an important first step, but incomplete. As a matter of fact, when Mark DeYoung presented me with the topics, he says, can you defend this topic? And I answered back, no. So I said, well, that's the end of me. I'm not going to be in this debate. He said, well, that's excellent. That's just what we want. Benedict XVI in Caritas in Veritate, which was the last encyclical that he wrote, challenged us, I quote here, not only to create ethical sectors or segments of the economy or the world of finance, but to ensure that the whole economy, the whole of finance, is ethical. You see, what happens is, as was said just now, that the topic is overwhelmingly complex. You're never going to find a way out to be moral. I mean, you're never going to get it straight completely. That's impossible. You're going to find ramifications. Somebody's in on it. Somebody's receiving something from it. It's impossible. So if you limit the moral presence of a Christian Catholic or a man to perform morally in a society, the whole thing has to be broadened. As a matter of fact, the Pope in 2006 to 2008 from Regensburg on, he has been trying to explain that reason has been dumbed down into a positivistic reduction, so that we're constantly dealing with numbers and figures and databases and Googles, and the result is that we don't know what's real. As a matter of fact, he gave a talk in 2008, which was unbelievable. Scott Hahn, in fact, I was talking to Scott Hahn, and he said it was breathtaking when the Pope explained that reality is the Word of God and everything else is secondary. Everything else. So the thing is that we're not quite in the real world. And we're going to be talking here about, about investment and the morality of this and the morality of that and how it works out. But ultimately, it's going to come down to what does it mean to be a person and what does it mean to be gift? To be like God, to be an image of God. That's what it's going to come down to. So anyway, I'll be thrown out of here. So Benedict XVI, well, let me just read this because I think it's very short. A complete approach which does respect those requirements intrinsic to the very nature of morality, must focus primarily on the working person, not just this or that investment, but the working person. What does it mean to be a worker? Because the real immorality is that half the world is out of work. John Paul II wrote, the human person is the primary root. And Father Newhouse, I remember underlined this 1,000 times in First Things. He loved to repeat this phrase, which is in number 53 of Centesimus Annus, that the human person is the primary route that the Church must travel in fulfilling her mission. This and this alone, says JP2, is the principle which inspires the Church's social doctrine. The economic morality which will create wealth, as the question is how do you create wealth? And wealth is the subject person having an impact and effect on the matter or the intellectual content that is created and transforming it. Wealth has to be created, and it's only going to be done by persons giving self, which is the real moral point, I think. I would critique SRI in that, by and large, it enters into the world of work from without, only to apply preformed moral categories to specific types of actions. It abstracts from persons and their work who are the core of the economic moral center. Benedict XVI has pointed out that Catholic social doctrine, quote, is based on man's creation in the image of God. Moral and socially responsible investment has to go beyond applying moral categories to what a company produces and focus on the morality of the working person created in the image of God and therefore called to give himself to others. Let me just finish with this. This is a statement by someone who I know very well out in Libertyville, Illinois. He's a retired CEO of Hollister Company that makes medical equipment. He says here it is. He says, Michael Wynn, retired CEO of Hollister Corporation, a $1 billion a year healthcare company, wrote in his president's vision, and with this I'll finish. Developing, manufacturing, and selling medical products is not our business. Our business is to serve customers, both inside and outside. Developing, manufacturing, and selling medical products are the activities we engage in order to serve. We do not exist to make a profit. This is not an end, but a means, the profit, by which we can continue as a strong, independently owned company. Our business purpose is to serve our customers and the community as a whole. Hollister will also be more personal as a working environment. I view work not as an occupation, but a vocation. Not a necessary chore for making a living, but an opportunity for personal development and fulfillment. I see Hollister associates to be persons in relationships of service to one another. They're all united in a common cause, each contributing his or her indispensable work well done, so that the individual efforts add up to a collective world-class unit. Last 4 lines. I recognize, of course, that it's difficult to identify companies that are actually inspired by a person-centered approach like that described by Wynn. But an investment philosophy that ignores that aspect and judges the morality of investments solely or primarily on the moral quality of the objects companies produce is merely rearranging the deck chairs on a sinking Titanic.